Hey mamas, I am so excited to share this podcast with you as my best friend Tess is sharing both of her birth stories with us. Every pregnancy and birth is different, and every mama has different priorities when it comes to what she wants for her birth to look like, and sometimes there's guilt or fear wrapped up in those decisions that she makes. In this podcast, Tess shares her two very different birth stories with us and how she overcame fears and self-doubt to come to a place of empowerment and acceptance of her birth experiences and who she is as a mother. I love her birth stories, and if you do too, make sure you subscribe, rate, and write a review of the Built to Birth podcast on whatever platform you're listening on, so each platform knows to share this podcast with more mamas who need to hear these empowering birth stories. You're going to hear how Tess used education and information to empower her birth experience. The unknown can be scary, but the more that you know, the less you fear. And if you want to be informed and empowered through your pregnancy and birth, I have an online childbirth education course that will teach you how to have a happier, healthier, and easier birth. Go to the Built to Birth website, which is linked down below in the descriptions, and subscribe to the weekly email so that you can stay up to date on what's happening at Built to Birth and so that you can know when that course is being released as well. Hi.
Hi.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I think it's funny that we live so close to each other and I haven't seen you for like the last 2 months because of this
I know.
shelter in place.
I know. I see you and you drive by and we wave from our balcony and that's about it.
I love it. Well, thank you for taking time to share your story. I know having 2 little kids, it's hard to like get away, but thank you for hopping on and sharing your stories with us.
Yeah, of course. I'm very thankful that I have a husband who can take over and lets me do things like this. So
and for nap time.
Yes, and for nap time.
It's like a godsend for all mothers everywhere.
It's the best time of the day.
I love it. Well, we're just going to hop into it because you have 2 kids. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family before we get started? Because I know you really well. You're my best friend, but not everyone else knows you. So why don't you just share a little bit about yourself and your family?
Okay. Well, I'm married to my husband, Evan. And we have 2 little babies. We have our daughter, Blake, and she is about 21 months. And then we have our newest little boy, Brian, and he just turned 3 months. And so we're adjusting to being a family of 4, and we're loving it. And I feel like we just kind of like hopped right into starting a family. And so, it's great and I love it. And I think that we love being around each other. We love hanging out. And we love learning what it's like to be parents as well as learning how to still be a married couple through all of that. And it's just really fun. We spend a lot of time with family. We spend a lot of time with you. We're just pretty easygoing, simple people, I guess.
I love it. So that's you in a nutshell.
Yeah.
For everyone who doesn't know you, that is Tess.
I know. I feel like I feel like being a mom, I feel like definitely, and I don't want to, getting like super deep with everything, but I feel like definitely recently, especially with 2 kids now, I feel like I've learned that like I'm kind of having like an identity crisis a little bit and feeling like, who am I? Like, am I just, is it like okay to just be a mom or, just be a wife or those things? And I think I'm learning that, just that those things are good things. And it's okay to have, your identity in, I am a mom and I am a wife, and I'm a great mom and a great wife. And, I have my hobbies, I have things that make me, but learning that like, this is where I am right now and being okay with that. And learning to love that and not being like pressured by, I feel like society to be like, well, you need to have your own thing. You need to find who you are, and just being like, this is a part of who I am. This is the biggest part of who I am. And that's good. And that's a good thing. So,
well, yeah, and I'm so glad you shared that off the bat, because I think that's a big thing that moms like struggle with once they've had their baby. I feel like so much preparation goes into the birth experience, and then all of a sudden you go through this like really big transition where you're like, oh my gosh, my whole identity has shifted,
yeah.
you know, and it's not that you are gone, it's just that you have changed.
Yeah.
And so like dealing with that identity shift and dealing with that kind of rediscovering where your identity lies and who you are is like a big thing to do. And it's a really big transition and experience. So I think that's great that you just mentioned that off the bat, that even though it can be challenging and, you know, it does feel like a bit of a crisis, it's like there's good in that, because change is good, and finding, you know, worth in those things is really powerful, because it is such an important job to be a good mom and to be a good wife supporting your husband, you know, and like that can look different in so many different ways, whether you're staying at home, whether you're at work, you know, whether you're working from home, whatever that is, like there is worth and value in who you are as a mom, as a, you know, businesswoman, as a wife, and all of those things. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Well, so Blake is 21 months, you said?
21
I
months,
should know that, because my daughter, they're like the
2
same
weeks
age.
apart.
So that's why one of the reasons why we're so close is because we had our babies so close together. So it's been really cool just to like experience motherhood and like see each other go through this big transition of motherhood at the same time. And since we're talking about Blake, why don't you share a little bit about your birth experience with Blake?
Yeah. So from kind of, I guess, like from the beginning with Blake, while I was pregnant, it's funny to like think about the contrast of both pregnancies and both deliveries. But with Blake, I think I was pretty nervous, like going into being pregnant, and especially as we got closer to delivery. I was like trying to do all this preparation, but kind of feeling like not really knowing how, and not really knowing, like, just because you have no idea what to expect, and trying to prepare the best that I could, but still feeling really nervous. And then, but you know, trying to be prepared, and I had you, which was great too, and you were going through it at the same time, so it was nice.
And I remember like going through that pregnancy with you, and we were both like facing it for the first time. And I remember you sharing just like how nervous you were. And I wasn't a doula yet. And so I was like learning all this stuff, and I was learning like, oh my gosh, like our bodies are like built to do this. And I was like super pumped for labor. And I remember you feeling like, I'm a little more nervous, more than like excited. And I saw that like change as you like got closer to giving birth. It was like coming to terms like, okay, I get to experience this. I'm going to experience this, and however it's going to be is going to be, and kind of coming to peace with that. I remember you kind of like going through that transition. Yeah,
and I think that that's something that is really important, because not everybody has access to a doula. Not everybody, you know, has the information that doulas have. You know, a lot of people just go into it and, you know, they don't have any preparation really. And so I think like coming out of it, I definitely like learned like the way that it went was good, and that's okay. Like it didn't, you know, have to be a certain way. And exactly how it happened was the way it was supposed to happen. But so,
wait, really quick, before hopping into your birth story, on a scale of 1 to 10, from 1 being like, I didn't know anything at all, I went in like blind to my birth experience, to 10 being like, I was so prepared, I learned everything I needed to, I could have, like, where do you feel like you were on the spectrum of like going into your birth experience with information?
With Blake?
Yeah.
Maybe like a 4.
Okay. Great.
Maybe I feel like I knew things, but I feel like I wasn't like, I feel like the fear was like taking over being able to like actually like implement them and like actually absorbing the information. I was just like, okay,
and
great.
Using it.
I just watched a lady give birth, and now I'm even more terrified.
You're like, what do I even do with that information?
Yeah.
That's good to know. Great. I love it. Okay. So keep going.
Okay. So with Blake, throughout the pregnancy, it was a really great pregnancy. She was super healthy. I was super healthy. At the end, I ended up having too much amniotic fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And so my doctor ended up wanting to induce me. And
were you like full term? Were
I
you past your due date?
39 weeks.
Okay.
And she wanted to induce me because the fluid, she was monitoring it and it just kept getting a little bit higher and it was making her uncomfortable. But Blake was still healthy and I was still healthy. So, but going back to like being nervous and being a first time mom and being scared, I was kind of like, whatever you say, like if you want to induce me, like I was nervous, and I didn't really have anybody giving me any other information other than like, this is what you should do. And which is not a bad thing. Doctors have your best interest, I think, and you want to be able to trust your doctor. So we ended up getting induced at 39 weeks and labor was super intense. I think we went in at about like 6:30 in the morning. And by the time I got there, when they started monitoring me, I already was like 2 centimeters dilated and I already was having contractions. And so now looking back, like hindsight, I'm like, man, I kind of wish that I would have just like waited a little bit longer if we were both healthy, because I was already in pre-labor. Like I probably would have gone into labor on my own anyways. But that's okay. And so I got there and we didn't have to do like the pill to soften my cervix or the balloon or anything like that because my body was already, doing it.
Yeah, doing the work. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they started me on pitocin and they started me super low. And then about like lunchtime came around, like noon, and I was having like kind of contractions and I was like, oh, this isn't that bad. I was like, this is going to be fine.
Yeah.
And then they came in and they're like, okay, well, we're going to break your water. And I was like, okay. And so she broke my water and immediately things like went to a whole new level. It was super intense. And then they ended up upping the pitocin as well. And so and now like hearing other moms' stories of like their pitocin and induction and everything, they had me on like a 14 for the pitocin. And I was like, oh my goodness, finding out after what act like normally. On, I was like, why the heck was it that high? Because it was pretty intense. I remember like seeing the contractions just like going up and then all the way to the top and then flatlining and then coming down. And it was
because I was there when that kind of was happening. And I saw like the shift from when they broke your water to like all of a sudden it was like super intense where you're just like, it was just all consuming and very, very few breaks in between your surges. And
I remember like in my preparation with labor, like, I remember just like listening to things about like not letting the fear take over and, those types of just not wanting to do that. And I remember specifically once I started like looking at the monitor and seeing the contractions and I would start to see them coming, my whole body would just be like, no, like I don't like, and I would get scared. And at that point, I feel like I was like, okay, this is when I know that I need an epidural. Like I can't do this anymore. And
because I remember asking you, are you in pain or are you suffering? And I remember you looking at me and you're just like, I'm suffering. And I was like, oh my gosh, then we need to make, we need to do something to get, because nobody wants to walk away from their birth experience thinking like, I suffered through that. Like that's not good for anyone. And so that's when I'm assuming was about the same time when you were like, I think I need to get an epidural.
Yeah. And going into it, I did not want an epidural. I was more scared, I feel like, of the epidural than I was of labor. Just because I have a health, like pre-existing health conditions. And because of those, I've had a ton of spinal taps, and
Yeah.
they've warned me before, just of like scar tissue and stuff like that. And I was, I've heard horror stories of people being paralyzed after, which is just awful. And I mean, not that that happens on the regular, but I was just really nervous about that. And so I was trying my hardest not to, need that. And then it got to the point where I was like, no, I need it, and give it to me now. I don't care what happens. I just want the epidural. Yeah. And so we ended up doing the epidural, and it felt great. And I felt like I could relax. I felt like I could rest. It was like a weird, like a funny part. It was, I don't know if you remember, but like at first it was like starting to come up, and I was like, I'm having like trouble breathing a little bit.
Yeah.
And they like elevated me, and it like went back down. And so everything was fine. And then the guy came in, and they gave me like the test dose, how they give you like just like starter dose at first, and then they figure out where you need to be. And so he came back in, and he was like, can you move your legs for me? Just like wiggle your toes. And I was like, I can't move anything. And he was like, you can't move anything? And I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And he was like so surprised, because he was like, I have you on the lowest dose possible, and you're completely like no function down there. And
I love that you were on the highest dose of pitocin and then the lowest dose of epidural.
I know. I was like, oh gosh. But then everything was fine. And, I ended up, I think I ended up kind of napping for a little bit. And then it's so weird. I feel like time is just not even a thing there. Like when you're in it, I'm like, what, like 15 minutes later? But no, it was probably hours later.
Yeah.
I remember telling Evan, I was like on my side, and I was telling Evan, I was like, oh, the contractions are coming back. I need more of the epidural. Like they need to up it. And so the nurse came in and kept telling me to push the button, and we kept pushing the button, and nothing was happening. And I was like, I need more. Like I'm starting to be in a lot of pain again.
Yeah.
And my nurse came back in, and she was like, let me check you. And she checked me, and she was like, nope, you're ready to go. Like she was like, you're fully dilated. You're ready to start pushing. You don't need more epidural. And so then we called you back, and you came back.
Yeah. And mind you, I was like almost 9 months pregnant at this time too. So all the nurses were like, are you okay? So I had gone home to like take a little nap and eat some dinner or something, and then had come back, and you were ready to push.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember it was like 8 p.m. And I started pushing, and I remember my nurse saying, you're going to have the baby at like 8:50. And I was like, okay. And so we started pushing, and it was, the epidural had like wore off to like the perfect spot. I was like, looking back on that, I was so thankful, because I could feel when I needed to push like a little bit. Like I kind of still was like, I don't really know. But I could feel like I could move my legs at that point. I could with assistance, but I could like feel, I could feel more. And so I wasn't just limp and numb.
Yeah. Which makes it a lot easier to tune into your body and, push with those contractions.
Yeah, it did. I was really grateful for that. And I remember time going by so fast. I was like, every time I would look at the clock, I feel like it had been like a minute, and it felt like 20 minutes had gone by.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I remember thinking like, we're about to meet her, 8:50. She said 8:50. And so we just kept pushing with every contraction. And my nurse was amazing. She kept just like telling me like, not as hard, push or harder or like bear down or, whatever ways she was instructing me. I felt like she did a great job. And I remember at one point in between contractions, I just was like needing to I felt like I just needed like a break in between, and I would just lay back and just like breathe and wait for the next one. And I remember at one point Evan, my mom, Evan's mom, and you guys. And I don't think you guys were being loud. I think you guys were just kind of like talking very quietly. And I remember being like, please stop talking.
You're just in the zone, and we're just like, no, we're about to have a baby. You're like, I'm doing all the work.
And it felt like everything was like enhanced. And so I just felt like I really needed like rest in between each contraction. And then it was like the last push, and she was like, the whole like, you can see the head, keep pushing, And I remember that last push, and I still to this day, like the best feeling with both. It's the same with both epidural or no epidural. I felt like that feeling of when like you push your baby out, and when like they bring it was just the best feeling. Unlike anything else. It was really amazing.
Yeah. And what time was she born?
8:54.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, wow, that
is amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. I love it. Well, looking back on that experience where, it wasn't necessarily what you were anticipating with the induction and getting the epidural, what kind of like, looking back, were some of the best things that you experienced during that labor, and some of the things that you were like, oh, I wish we could have gone back and done that differently, if there are any things?
Yeah. I think more, to be honest, more than like the practical things that I wish were different, I really think that I wish my mindset was different.
Wow.
I feel like I wish that I was more okay with what was going to happen. And rather than like, okay, I need to do things this way. And, if I don't do this way, this person's going to, think poorly of me, or this or that, and so many outside influences.
Yeah.
I feel like I really wish that I was just more like giving it up and being like, however I can get my child here healthy, and however I can keep myself healthy, and however, and not suffering, like you said. And I think the one thing too is that the epidural, I think it was necessary in the moment, and for just my own comfort and sanity. And I really don't think that I could have kept going without an epidural. But the recovery from the epidural, and after contrasting both births, I do feel like I wish that I could have done it without an epidural, but I don't want to but I don't think that I would have changed it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, totally.
Because the recovery was difficult with the epidural. I do feel that.
Why do you think that was the case?
I don't know. I don't know like this really like the science behind like what happens. But just like from my experience, I feel like I was so groggy. I like couldn't get up and walk. It felt like for like a couple days I was like I was in pain still. And I don't know if that's more related to just like tearing or being in labor for 12 hours, but I just feel like the recovery from the epidural was harder. I just feel like it was more difficult with the epidural than it was without. I feel like, and I know this will come with Brian's birth story, but I feel like without the epidural, I was like awake, alert. I was like, all right.
Yeah.
What are we going to do today?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and I feel like that is sometimes the case because there is limited like sensations when you have the epidural. And so that's awesome that you were able to, it was able to like wear off just enough so you could sense the surges and kind of feel the power of your pushing. But I feel like that is sometimes what happens is that, you're pushing so hard because it's hard to know what your body is telling you to do because you have those limited sensations.
Yeah, and that is true. I do like remember, and contrasting again the births, I do like with Blake, I could feel but I could not feel how hard I was pushing. I couldn't feel, like when to stop on my own or anything like that. So I do think that definitely played a role into the recovery as well.
Yeah. But you got your beautiful baby girl at the end of it all. And I remember just like looking at you and Evan and just like see you guys both tear up over this beautiful girl that you brought into the world. And he was like, Evan was just so in awe of you, was just like, I cannot believe, and he kept saying that, like, I can't believe you just did that. I can't believe you just did that. And so like I was so honored to be a part of that experience. And then fast forward, you found out you were pregnant with Brian when Blake was how old?
8, 9 months.
Yeah. 8 or 9 months. That sounds about right. So
I found out on Mother's Day that I was pregnant.
That is so good. That's like the best gift /
it was
surprise.
It was a complete surprise. Well,
yeah.
Like a few days before, I was like, I'm pregnant. I know I'm pregnant. but
then I remember you and I had a conversation. You're like, no, I'm not. Like, there, I think I started my period, and then you ended up taking a pregnancy test and being like, okay, I was spotting and I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
I remember. And so kind of, go ahead.
I just remember telling Evan, I'm pregnant. I know I'm pregnant. And he's like, you always think you're pregnant. You're not pregnant. And like 4 days later, I took the test and he was like, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, it was meant to happen. And then going into your pregnancy, kind of being really like close to your labor and delivery with Blake.
Yeah.
Kind of what was your mindset? How did that change a little bit during the second pregnancy that you had?
Yeah, I really wanted to do it naturally. I really didn't want to have to be induced. I really wanted to, and because you were going through everything with becoming a doula and just like normal conversation, I'm like learning a ton of stuff through you in those 9 months. And so I feel like I had more information and I felt more empowered that like, okay, like I can do this, and I really wanted to be able to do that.
Do you feel like being a second time mom too, like experiencing it for the second time, it wasn't so foreign and so it was a little bit less scary?
Yeah, I do think it was less scary. I think I definitely felt like I know that my body can do this regardless of how we get there. I know my body can do it. I feel like I was more this time, just more like however it happens, it's going to be okay. Because I've done the side that I didn't want to happen,
Yeah.
The way that I would have rather it not go. And so I know that, if that had to happen again, I would still have my beautiful son. I would be okay. And it would be just fine. 2 days after your birth, you're like, you don't even remember what happened pretty much. So it's like, I knew that and felt confident that it was going to be okay. I felt like I wanted to prepare more.
Yeah.
Which I feel like I did. I feel like I was practicing my breathing techniques all the time. And even without contractions, just like if I was getting anxious or anything like that, I would use those breathing techniques. I felt like I felt more prepared. I felt more confident. And I felt, like I said, more confident that either way, it's going to be okay. And I don't need to be.
Yeah.
So, which that's kind of what happens when you've gone through something before, it's not as scary.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think that does play a role in how you prepare, and just like it takes some of the guesswork out of it. But then at the same time, I remember you feeling nervous because going from, like more of a medicalized birth where there were more interventions to really wanting to have like a very natural experience without the induction, without the epidural. It was kind of like experiencing birth
like all over
for the
again.
first time again a little bit. And I just remember you just constantly grappling with like, can I do this? Can I do this? And I think that's every mom. Every mom, it grapples with that. I think every pregnancy, you know, at some point you're like,
it's a whole new thing.
Like, I'm going to have to do this at the end of 9 months. Can I do this? You know, because every pregnancy and every birth is different, you know, and so you do have to kind of like figure that out for yourself and come to those terms and, you know, like you said, prepare again. So going into, you know, your birth experience with Brian, feeling a little bit more informed, a little bit more empowered, you know, having more tools in your toolbox for how to like cope with your labor, kind of walk us through your experience with Brian's birth.
Yeah. So, also I want to add too really quick. The like another thing that you suggested that totally helped is like, I just would repeat things to myself, like affirmations, like I can do this. Like my body was made to do this. I can do this. And I remember even in labor telling myself those things out loud. And those like it's you feel stupid saying it. You feel like dumb kind of. I did a little bit like talking to myself, like but it helps because I feel like I feel like it goes to your mind and it you know, your body, like you always say, your body follows. And like, I just feel like that really was important.
Thank you for sharing that because I think you're exactly right. And I think more moms, like it's feeding yourself truth because our mind lies to us all the time, you know, and it wants to instill doubt and fear and make us feel like we're not worthy. And all the time, like especially as women, I feel like we have to combat those things. And especially when it comes to pregnancy and birth, just affirming ourselves and saying, no, I can do this. I was built to do this. Like my mind's not going to hold me back because I know my body can do this. And so I think that is so powerful. So thanks for adding that in.
It was something that totally changed things, I think, for me. So, so with Brian, things were pretty good with him still. Towards the end, again, I ended up having more fluid. But this time I was like, if I can keep going, if he's healthy and I'm healthy, I want to keep waiting. Like I was like, I will wait till 42 weeks. I want to give him a chance to come on his own. And my doctor was on board with that. And I kept having to go do non-stress tests like twice a week, just to monitor the fluid and the placenta and him. And if, you know, everything was okay, and he was fine. And so we just kept waiting. And at one point, I remember like bending over to change Blake, and I swore my water broke. I was like, either my water broke or I full on peed my pants. Like not just like a like drizzle, like full on peed my pants. And everyone's like, oh, your water broke. Your water totally broke. Go to the hospital. I called and they're like, okay, come in and we'll like make sure. And I get there and literally everyone is like, your water broke. Your water broke. And they're like, nope, you're fine. Your water didn't break. And I was like, you've got to.
I just peed myself.
Like, I literally full on peed my pants. And it wasn't so much my fault. He was super, super low for like months. And I was like 3 centimeters dilated by like, by the beginning of my 9th month. And so.
And everyone was like, oh, you're going to go into labor like
my doctor
today.
was like, you're not going to your due date. She was like, I'd be surprised if he doesn't come like 3 weeks early. Like she was like, I can feel his whole head. Like, she was like, you're not going to your due date. And so literally time is just passing and passing and passing. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? But so, and I feel like I prepared a lot more, this I guess is not preparation, but there were a lot more things that I did that I feel like naturally could have helped him come. I was doing like the clary sage and coconut oil. I was trying to do a lot of like the rosemary tea and
the red raspberry leaf tea.
raspberry or rosemary tea, the raspberry leaf tea, to like strengthen my uterus, which I didn't really know a ton about before. I was like doing a lot of like exercising on the bouncing ball. And I also had at the very end, she was 17 months old. And so I had a toddler who
that you were so active with.
Yeah. And I think that that's also a contributing factor to why I wasn't as like nervous this time, I think, because I didn't really have a lot of time just to like sit down and constantly be thinking about it.
Yeah.
Until the very end. But I was like walking up and down 2 flights of stairs like multiple times a day. And with Blake, I was like the kind of classic like first pregnancy, I'm just gonna eat whatever I want, sit on the couch and watch movies, you know?
Yeah. And definitely like the physical work that you put in beforehand, I feel like definitely helped you the second time around for sure.
Yeah. So I woke up at like about midnight, and
how close were you to your due date at this point?
I was 5 days away.
Okay. So you woke up at midnight, 5 days away from your due date.
Yeah. And I was like having kind of contractions, but I had been having like contractions here and there previously, like for like a month. And so I was like, I don't know. But then I got up and I had diarrhea a few times pretty bad. And then I was just like laying in bed and the contractions kept coming, and I woke up Evan and I was like, I think this might be it. I was like, but I've also thought that my water broke like a week ago, so I'm not sure about anything.
And again, it's like you're experiencing this for the first time.
Yeah, and exactly, because I have no idea what it's like to go into labor naturally. Like I didn't know anything that would feel like, you know. And so I remember I laid in bed for like an hour, and they kept getting closer. They started out at like 10, 11 minutes, and then they got to about like 8 minutes apart. And it had been going on consistently for like an hour. And so Evan was like, okay, well, and he was like, this is probably it. And so I was like, okay, well, let's get our bags packed. We hadn't even had our bags packed. I was like, let's like get going. And, you know, just in case. I was like, just in case this is it. And so like, it was so weird. The second I stood up, they went from 8 minutes to like 4 minutes. And I was like, okay, this is definitely it. And then we called literally everybody and nobody answered. And we were like, who's going to come watch Blake while I'm giving birth? And his brother finally answered and like woke up his mom, and his mom came over. You came over. And I remember when you got here, I still was like, are we sure this is it? And you were like, you're in labor.
As you're sitting on the birth ball, like breathing through your contractions every 4 minutes apart. Like, yes, this is it.
Yeah. And so then we were like talking about, okay, should we go to the hospital? Should we wait a little bit longer? Because that was another thing that I did want. I was like preparing for it. I was like, okay, I want to labor at home as soon as possible because I know, or as long as possible, because I know that the chances of intervention, the earlier you go in, the higher they are. And so I was like, okay, I want to stay home as long as possible. And I was able to talk through, like, in between the contractions, I was like, nothing's even going on. But when the contractions were happening, I was like bent over and breathing. And so I think we were kind of like, okay, we could wait a little bit. And then I don't know why, but we were like, okay, let's go. And I think it was like 2 a.m. We ended up leaving and we got to the hospital at like 2:30. And on the drive there, I was like, good thing we came now, because they like started just getting more and more intense. And we got in and we checked in and we got into the triage room, and the nurse checked me. And when I got there, I was like a 6 already. And so I was like, that was something that was like amazing. So empowering to me. I was like, I've already gotten to a 6 and I haven't had any medication, anything. And I've been like, I was like, I've been handling these really well. And so I was like, I can do this. And the nurse was like, I'm not even going to like waste time in here. She was like, I think this is going to be fast. And so she like started to move us to our room. And I remember, and it was just so cool. Our nurse ended up she was a doula. And she ended up being like, do you want to do this naturally or do you want medication? And I was like, no, I really want to do this naturally. And she looked at me and she was like, you are so in control of your body right now. She was like, you are going to be able to do this. And I just remember like almost wanting to cry. I was like, so excited. I was just like, I can freaking do this. And this is going to be great. And we like got into the room and, they did all the, like, she like checked, like, admitted me in our actual room instead of in triage. And the contractions just kept coming and coming. They tried to give me an IV. And they tried like 6 times. And the ICU nurse had to come down and finish my IV because they couldn't figure it out. But they finally did. And then it just seems so short compared to me. But I kept having contractions, and I just remember the best thing being like literally completely relaxing my entire body from my head to my toes, like just having to completely just like be limp, and like even my mouth just like like everything being completely relaxed, and breathing. The breathing was like the lifesaver to it because it was the best thing that I could have ever done, is practice those breathing techniques and being able to implement them in labor without being like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Like I didn't practice this. And so like not being able for it to come naturally. And so that was great. And then the doctor came in and I was about at an 8, and he was like, honestly, if we break your water right now, you're probably going to have him in like the next hour. And so I remember like kind of being like, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm ready for that, because they also said like, once we break your water, things are going to get a lot more intense. And so I was like, but I've come this far. I don't want to like end up being like, no, give me an epidural. And she was like, take your time, you can decide. And then, I think it was only like a few minutes. And then I was like, let's just break my water. And so we broke my water, and that's a crazy feeling. Like feeling like all of a sudden the baby, it feels like all of a sudden the baby isn't like floating or protecting anything. It feels like they're just like there.
Ready. Boom.
And so after she broke my water, things definitely started to pick up. I remember thinking like before that I was like, oh, I want to have all these different like positions that I like, can labor in, because with Blake, I wasn't able to really do any of that because I had the epidural. But the only position that felt good was like hunched over, like sitting on the ball, like hunched over and just holding on to Evan. And I was like, I could have labored like that. I pretty much did labor like that the whole time.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
And then I got on all 4s and started laboring like that. And I never understood until it happened what everybody says and what you always say about like, you could literally be unconscious and your body would push the baby out. Like that's what happens. I never understood that until I was like, my body was just pushing on its own. And I wasn't quite there yet. They were like, try not to push, I had like a tiny little bit on one side that still needed to dilate. Other than that, I was at, I think, about a 10.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I remember being on all 4s, and this is going to sound really weird, but it was like, I was like heaving. It was like, just like, I like had to put, it was just doing it.
Was so involuntary. Yeah. Just like your body was doing the pushing for you, and people were like, try not to push. And it's like, I can't.
I was like, I cannot not push. I remember being really nervous because I was like, I feel like I physically cannot push, but I don't want to, they're telling me not to. I don't want to do anything to hurt myself, to hurt the baby,
Yeah.
And so I just like was trying to breathe through as much as I could. And then I think they came and they checked me, and then they were like, okay, you can push. And so, and I remember being on all fours and I had like the gown and they tried to roll me onto my back so I could push. And the gown is like wrapped around me. And I was like, get this thing off of me. I was like, I feel like I'm like suffocating here.
Yeah.
But then we got onto my back, and surprisingly, that was the best way for me to push. I felt like I wanted to push.
Yeah. Because I remember you tried to push for a little bit on all fours and, you were like, no, I want to be, on my back. And then you brought yourself up a little bit to where like you could hold your legs. And it's funny because, that's the position where like, try not to be in that position, but really it depends on every woman and every labor. And so it just goes to show that you were in tune with your body and your baby. And you're like, this is the position, like instinctually, you were like, this is the position that I need to be in.
Yeah, it was, it's so weird that, cause you say that and it's like, it was totally instinctual. Like and because preparing like, and, knowing all the different suggestions and, this might be better. I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll end up, giving birth on all fours, or maybe I'll squat or, something. But in that moment, I was like, no, I need to be on my back and I want to be like sitting up and just like kind of like in a ball. And, and so once I got there, the contractions weirdly slowed down too. Do you remember that? Like, I was pushing.
Yeah. And that's like normal too,
Which I remember asking the doctor, I was like, what's happening? Like, I was like, is he still coming? Like, cause 5 minutes ago, the contractions were like, boom, 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 boom. But she was like, that's your body just like giving you some time to rest. And, I think she said that.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. But, so then I think I pushed, 3 times.
Yeah.
And came out and it was great. And like, and honestly, like, it sounds crazy. This is going to sound like absolutely crazy, but as I'm thinking about it now, and I know like oxytocin has like the amnesia effect and all of that, but as I'm thinking about it now, I'm like, I don't feel like Brian's birth, like doing it naturally, was any more painful than Blake's.
Yeah.
Like I do not feel that whatsoever. And so I'm like, why, like that, it was, Brian's birth was just,
it's
like,
a surreal experience.
I was like, this is just like, that was the best like possible outcome that we could have ever had. Like it was great. It was, and I don't like, I don't want to be like someone that's like like always do it naturally, because you'll feel like so much better and it'll always be better, because like I really do think that it depends on the circumstance. It depends on the person. And I like looking back on Blake's birth, it was a beautiful, beautiful birth. And it was a beautiful thing to bring Blake into the world. And Brian's was just the same. Like I would, want
that was the experience that needed to happen for that birth.
Yeah. And it was totally. It was great. And I really, it's like, I don't know, you feel kind of like, and like I said, I don't mean this in a way of like epidurals, inductions, amazing. Like there is not one is better than the other. Yeah. But I walked away from it being like, man, like I'm a badass. Like
you feel like, so strong and like powerful.
Yeah. And it was great. And after, like I said, I felt great after. Like I had
kind of you share that experience postpartum, because you said you feel like the epidural is kind of what made you feel a little bit like that, made that initial postpartum feel a little bit, uncomfortable. And took some adjusting to. What kind of was that postpartum experience with Brian's birth?
Yeah, after, I mean, I had him at 5:30 in the morning. So like we had the whole day to like be awake and people coming and everything. And so I think that it was just like perfect the way that it happened, because if I had had Blake's birth at 5:30 in the morning and then have to do the whole day, that would be really difficult. But like I said, after I literally felt like I don't want to make
like you could have gone and taken care of your toddler.
I was like, I could go home right now. Like I was like, I felt great. Like I did not feel like I had just had a baby. And And I was like up and walking around, like going to the bathroom just fine. Even my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law were like, wow, you are doing like so much better than how you were after you had Blake. Like like I said, it was hard to get up and go to the bathroom or sit back down. And, you know, obviously like as the epidural's wearing off, you feel like, you know, your limbs and everything don't feel super normal. But yeah, after Brian, it felt great. I felt really great.
Yeah. And I think that's just like the cherry on top of how like you're able to work with your body in labor to make it so it was manageable. Because I remember that was like one of the first things that you said in kind of like processing your birth. Like while we were still at the hospital, you're like, I can't believe like how manageable that was.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there was one time, I mean, you kept asking us like, can I do this? Can I do this?
Yeah.
And we kept being like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And then there was one time where I think you were in transition where you're like honestly looked in the eyes, like, can I do this? But besides that, I don't feel like there was like a time where you were like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
You know, you just needed those affirmations from your support team telling you, yes, you can do this.
Yeah. I remember thinking in my head at one point, like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And then I remember and this is something that you have said like over and over again, it's just one more contraction, one more contraction, one more contraction, one more, and you're closer to meeting him, one more, and you're closer to meeting him. And I kept trying to repeat that in my head because I just was like, I don't want to give up. You know, I can do this. And I think too, at the point when I was like, I honestly don't know if I can do this. And I remember in my head fighting with myself being like, ask for the epidural. No, you're not going to ask for the epidural. Like, and I remember fighting with myself. And then honestly, it seemed like things just kept like progressing. And as I kept saying, no, I'm not going to do it, or like, no, I'm not going to ask for it. It was like, it got to the point where there was not even time to ask for it.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like you started like when you're like, can I do this? Was the point where it was like the point of no return.
Yeah.
It's like, you can do this and you have to do this. Yeah, exactly. But I love that you can look back on both of your experiences, both being so different and seeing beauty in both of those. And I think that's such an encouragement for moms who are deciding if they want an epidural or if they want a natural birth or if they, you know, need to be induced or, you know, if they can wait. Just there's so many options, and to know that there's no wrong or right way to give birth. I think that's just really encouraging. And so I think just showing that, you know, there are pros and cons to each kind of birth and different feelings and physical sensations that come along with both sides. And so like, thank you so much for sharing both of those experiences with us.
I just to reiterate what you're saying, I think that every woman, no matter how they give birth, should feel extremely empowered and extremely just amazing about themselves because like you said, there's no right or wrong way. And I hate thinking that, you know, someone watching someone who's given a natural birth and that person not feeling worse about themselves or anything like that.
Because it's not at all.
Brought a baby into this world. And whatever means you had to do that is perfect. And I think that's just something that is amazing. So
yeah, I love it. Well, if there's one thing that you could share with any mom that's listening to this who is, you know, either processing through their birth story or approaching their birth or in those first few weeks of postpartum, I know this is a big question, but what would be the thing that you think that they need to hear? Like the big takeaway for them?
I feel like it's okay, like, not to be okay sometimes. And I think that, and maybe this is just because this is like the kind of the season that I'm going through right now, just in postpartum and like bonding with my new baby. Just, and I think that can be applied to labor, to, you know, preparing for labor while you're pregnant and postpartum. Just, it's okay to need help. It's okay not to have it all together. It's okay to be an emotional wreck. It's okay to say, I can't do this and I need help, or I need an epidural, or I'm scared to go into labor. You know, it's okay not to have it all together. And I really, really do think as moms, we put the pressure on ourselves to have everything together, to be, you know, the backbone of the family, to be this strong woman for our children, you know, to not want to burden our husbands with, you know, things because they have a lot going on too, you know, all of that, whatever part of this journey. I think that it's okay to take a step back and be like, I need some help. And I think that that's just so important. And like I said, that's kind of where we are right now. My husband's having to do a lot more than he did, I think, with Blake, just because I've been having a little bit of a hard time adjusting. And so and I need to remind myself that that's okay. And this is just a short time. And, you know, you are an amazing mother, and no other mom could be a better mom to your kids than you. And I think that that's something that I would really love to hear. And that's something that I appreciate when other people tell me that.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's going to be so encouraging for moms to hear, because you're right, it applies to whether you're pregnant, whether you are actively giving birth, or you are in that postpartum period, asking for help and knowing that there's so much strength in asking for that help and being okay with things not playing out exactly like you envision them to. You know, just taking it as it goes. And so I think that's a huge encouragement. And I know that mamas listening to this are going to be so encouraged by both your birth stories and just that little bit of encouragement at the end for them. Is there anything that you want to add to that?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Said all you could say. I love it. I think I cut you off. You said, I hope.
I hope that it is an encouragement.
Good.
Because you can feel like weak if you ask for help, or, you know, and I hope that that's an encouragement that you're not weak, and that you are strong and you're capable, and sometimes needing help is the best thing that you can ask for. Yeah,
that's true. Well, thank you again. I know that you have probably maybe a tiny bit of nap time left, so I hope you can have a little bit of alone time before the two Julians wake up. So, okay. Well, thank you again for sharing your story, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Well, mamas, I hope that you are encouraged by Tess's birth stories and know that you can find empowerment and beauty no matter what your birth experience looks like. She talked about the power of her mind in both pregnancies and birth experiences, and how fear sucks the confidence we have when it comes to birth. If you want to build up your confidence in your ability to birth and be a mama, you can purchase and download the Built to Birth affirmation meditations through my website that I have linked in the description below. And if you want to learn about how to build up your mind, body, and team to experience a happier, healthier, and easier birth, I have an online childbirth education course coming out very soon, so head over to my website that is linked down below and subscribe to the weekly email newsletter so that you can stay up to date on what's happening over at Built to Birth and when the course is coming out. So thanks for being with me in this podcast, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, mamas.